Bringing it to a close, I've got our last panel to introduce here, and helping to drive the ship is Frank Marino, who's the VP Commercial at Isologic Innovative Radiopharmaceuticals, to have a really important conversation about navigating reimbursement and healthcare capacity as we look to the future for this important space. So please welcome Frank and the panel.
Thank you very much, Melody, for inviting me to be the moderator of the hot potato session of the day. We'll make sure that we have a useful conversation and try to find solutions to some of the issues that are affecting reimbursement and healthcare capacity for radioligand therapies in Canada. Panelists are here, great. So I'm from Isologic Innovative Radiopharmaceuticals. We are the leading provider of unit dose PET and SPECT radiopharmaceuticals in Canada. Our products will touch over 600,000 patients in Canada this year. So we certainly are an important part of the healthcare system here in Canada, mainly in Ontario and Quebec, but we do ship our products across Canada. So a disclaimer before we start. So the opinions expressed by the panelists are their own. They don't necessarily reflect the opinions of their institutions. I just want to make that clear before we start. And also explain that we are going to have two parts to this panel session. The first part will deal specifically with reimbursement. The second one will deal with healthcare capacity for radiotheranostics. Okay, so first step is to have the panelists introduce themselves. So maybe Jane, you can start from left to right. Go ahead.
Since I have the mic. So thanks very much for the invitation. My name is Jane Lapon. I'm Head of Global Market Access for Photocure. I'm a pharmacist. I used to be a drug plan manager in the UK back for NICE before moving to industry, and I've worked in global market access roles for the last 15, 20 years, including in this space. Had the pleasure of working with Frank for many years, and it's a pleasure to be here. This is a topic that's very near and dear to my heart.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here and see a lot of colleagues and friends in the audience. My name is Amit Singh Nurkar. I've been doing nuclear medicine. I'm a nuclear medicine physician. I've been doing this for about 20 years. I spent 10 years in Hamilton, had various leadership roles there, was department chief there. I'm at Sunnybrook Health Sciences now as a clinician scientist. I've also been working with Cancer Care Ontario for the last 10 years, sitting on various advisory committees, and I'm currently co-chair of the Radioligand Therapy Committee at CCO. So thanks for having me.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Céline Landy. I'm the Vice President for Radioligand Therapy at Novartis Canada. So I'm essentially in charge of the access and the commercialization of our RLT assets, mainly Lutathera and Pluvicto. Thanks for having me again this year.
Hello, everyone. I'm Julia Publicover, and I'm a Director for Translational Research and Innovation at UHN here in Toronto. I've been at UHN for about 20 years now, but before that, I started my career out at Triumph doing radioisotope production for medicine. And then at UHN, I've held a number of different roles, and most recently, I've been overseeing a number of our core research services in molecular imaging and theranostics, and helping our core team move theranostics into the clinic at UHN.
Great, thank you very much for your introductions. So the first theme of the panel session today is reimbursement. So these questions aim to explore policy gaps, equity challenges, and the economic value of radioligand therapies like Pluvicto. So the first question is addressed to Dr. Singh Nurkar. Dr. Singh Nurkar, how do we define full cycle reimbursement in the context of radiotheranostics, and where are the current gaps in achieving it across provinces?
Okay, so in the theranostic space, I think about it in two buckets. So the first one is diagnostic. So you got to figure out if the patient is eligible for the treatment. Some people kind of forget about the diagnostics piece, and there's theranostics. And once these two parts are funded, then you'll have all the ancillary costs, the technical fees. So with regards to the diagnostics, once you have the funding, and that's not universal, so I think we're quite fortunate in Ontario working with CCO. We have access to pretty much all the traces that we need. We have PSMA agents, dotatate agents, FDG, of course. We also have agents for Alzheimer's disease, which I know some other jurisdictions don't have. So that kind of needs to be standardized across provinces because all Canadians should have equitable access to these diagnostics. So once you have the funding for your diagnostic agent, then there are other fees that need to be kind of compensated and considered. So number one, you need some payment for your camera time, and so that needs to kind of include your capital costs, your maintenance costs, payment for your technologist, of course, and your physician reading fees. And I know in different jurisdictions, these are all kind of paid out by different people. And then there's like consumables and things like that, booking. So once you've kind of covered that, once you know your patient is eligible, then you have access to the therapeutic agent. Hopefully, again, we're very fortunate in Ontario. We got access to Pluvicto. We've had Lutathera for quite some time. Let's not forget about Lutathera. So we've had these agents. We've had Pluvicto since the beginning of this year, and we've treated many patients, fortunately. But again, that is not universal against different jurisdictions. I know there are certain provinces that don't have access, which is unfortunate. But that also needs to be standardized again. So once you've secured funding for a therapeutic agent, then there are a whole host of other things that you need to cover. So there are many more people involved. Number one, again, technologists. You need radiation safety officers because we also have to address public safety. You need your physician. So you have to be physician agnostic, right? So we really need a multidisciplinary team. There's not enough nuclear medicine physicians. There are radiation oncologists. There are medical oncologists. So whoever is administering and caring for the patient should have some form of payment. The other part is, you don't know whether it's going to be a simple outpatient. Nothing is simple, but it's not going to be an outpatient versus an inpatient treatment, right? So I know at Sunnybrook, from our experience, about 10% of our patients end up being inpatient for a number of different reasons. And so that increases your cost. Then you have to clean the room, you have to clean the washroom, you have to monitor. You also have to store the waste material somewhere and dispose of it. So all these things add to the cost. The other part, lastly, that I want to forget is if you decide to do interim scans to see how they're doing, that's not funded anywhere to my knowledge, and dosimetry studies, which I do believe we should do. Perhaps not everyone's convinced, but if you do those, then you certainly need to have a medical physicist, dosimetry software, technologist time, all those things to kind of get that accomplished.
Anybody else have any comments on what Dr. Sinekar said? Jane? Very comprehensive, very complex, I think, is the word that comes to mind. I want to commend CCO as well. I mean, Cancer Care Ontario has done a good job of being at the forefront of reimbursement and funding. They do reimburse Illuccix and Locumets. They've also been at the forefront of reimbursing other oncology therapies, TheraSphere, for example, a few years ago. So I think we have a negative view of reimbursement in Canada, but certainly there are some positive success stories that we need to talk about. So let's talk about the start of the show now next. That would be Pluvicto. I mean, Celine is, I guess, the star of the show as well. So Celine, I understand that Pluvicto has achieved reimbursement in many Canadian provinces, so congratulations on that. What lessons were learned from achieving public reimbursement for Pluvicto?
Thanks for the question. So, of course, achieving public reimbursement for Pluvicto, as most of you in the room know, has been quite a long process. Just to remind everybody, we got Health Canada approval in September 2022. And we treated in London, in Ontario, the first patient in December 2024. So it's 26, 27 months between the approval and the first patients being treated. So, but now you would probably wonder, so where are we in terms of the rollout of the therapy in the different provinces? So most of the provinces have actually listed Pluvicto across Canada. So from that perspective, it's great. We're still missing a few provinces, and we continue to work with the different provinces, specifically Manitoba and Quebec. So we are hopeful to see those provinces coming on board in the next couple of weeks. If you remember, it's actually surprising to see Quebec not listed today. If you remember, Quebec was actually the first province to list and fund Pluvicto as early as September 2022, so up right after Health Canada approval, the province made the drug available. We're going to have the first real-world evidence study published this coming June with the 50 patients at the CHU de Québec. So we're gonna see some great real-world evidence in Canada being published in the next couple of weeks. So we continue to work to expand the availability of Pluvicto. I want actually to recognize the collaboration of Ontario in this whole process. The trust, the collaboration from actually all of you in the room has been absolutely instrumental in bringing radioligand therapy and specifically Pluvicto to the Canadian patients. I also want to give a special recognition to BC Cancer. BC Cancer was thinking about access together with a broad capacity and implementation. We're going to talk about capacity in the second part of the panel, but they've come with a very innovative solution when it comes to making the treatment available for patients.
Great. Thank you for that, Celine. So the next question will be directed to Julia. So Julia has been involved in, or actually put together a case costing study to justify the value of lutetium-177 therapy. And so this question is directed to her. How does real-world data play a role in strengthening the reimbursement case for new RLTs in Canada?
Yeah, thank you. I can't take credit for all of the case costing for sure, but I can tell you a bit about UHN's experience in it. So at UHN, we've had a number of people that have been very engaged in the theranostics community for quite some time. So we were anticipating the arrival of new radioligand therapies, and Pluvicto being the one we were really anticipating to grow our numbers. So the clinic, they were very enthusiastic to be able to provide these to their patients, but we knew that providing it would be complex and resource intensive, so we had to find a way that it would be sustainable in order for the hospital to deliver it. So to that end, we partnered with London because they shared similar concerns to us. And together we created in-depth case costing for reimbursement. And this was based on our real-world processes and experience. On the UHN side, we drew heavily from our clinical trials experience, actually. So this is a bit unusual. Ontario Health would usually lead the case costing, but we believe that our real-world data would help our institutions as well as to accelerate the reimbursement process for this. And we believe it proved to be true. Ontario Health was very receptive to our submission. It was well received, and we do believe that it helped with the timely approval of funding. I have to say there were a few key factors that we were lucky to have in place that made it possible. So one, I mentioned, we participated in clinical trials, so we gained that real-world experience from clinical trials. We had a very engaged multidisciplinary team that helped drive it. We had the strong collaboration with the other hospital as well to ensure that we were headed down the right path and it made sense. We had ongoing and open dialogue with government stakeholders, so both at Ontario Health, but also with the Ministry of Health as well. And even though we had those strengths, it was still far from simple. Our project management and finance teams had to engage every department across the hospital that was involved in the delivery of these therapeutics. So, I mean, just to name a few, it's radiology and nuclear medicine, oncology, nursing, radiopharmacy, radiation safety, among others. So it was a lot of scrambling to get this information all into one place. So looking ahead, we expect that we're going to get new indications for the existing therapeutics. We'll get new agents as well. And so we're really hoping that the groundwork that we've already laid is going to help us adapt efficiently. But that said, we also know that the costs and our best practices are going to evolve as we learn more, as we gain more real-world experience. So right now, we're actively process mapping what it is that we're doing right now, and we're trying to maintain close engagement with industry so that we can understand where your pipelines are going, what your timelines are, so that we can ensure that we're ready for the next thing to come, and that we can continue to make the strong case for reimbursement using the real-world experience that we gain.
Great, that's excellent. I mean, that's an excellent example of cross-sector collaboration between academia, private sector, and public sector as well. to achieve what you achieved there. So congratulations on that. That's great. Now, real-world data seems to be becoming more and more prominent in achieving reimbursement decisions for oncology products. I know that in the U.S. market with TheraSphere, Jane, real-world data was used as well to get a PMA for TheraSphere prior to the completion of the Level 1A evidence trials, right? Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yes, it was. I mean, the TheraSphere journey has been a long one. But certainly in the US, from the regulatory approval perspective, it had an HDE classification, so effectively considered experimental. And despite many conversations with the FDA over many years, ultimately what they had requested was, no, go away, go and do your RCT. This is what we want it to look like. But because of the broad use of TheraSphere globally, and certainly the amount of evidence that was being generated in that real-world capacity, we were actually able to package it up in such a way that we answered the fundamental questions that the FDA were asking, and effectively got the full marketing authorization for it as a consequence of that. So it's very reflective of what a lot of payers do as well, that real-world evidence is definitely something that's very valuable. So great to hear that you've got data coming.
Thanks, Jane. So another question for you. So what are the most immediate opportunities for collaboration between industry, government, and academic institutions to align on RLT coverage criteria and timelines?
It's been great to hear that effectively what we've got here is actually collaboration and the outputs of it. And I would say the biggest opportunity in my mind is the fact that we are actually all talking about this, that we're, we have a fully representative panel here of all of the key players that are needed to actually drive reimbursement and drive change. And I'm going to come back to TheraSphere again, and, we're launched the product, 20-something years ago. Canadian company, Canadian product, and yet Canada was the one market where we didn't have reimbursement, we didn't have access for patients. And a lot of that is to do with the fragmented nature for this whole class of products. And, the Pluvecta is slightly different because it is classed as a drug, but everything else, including the diagnostics, sort of fall into a category that just really aren't addressed properly. So I kind of feel that we've got a voice now that we didn't have 20 years ago. We've got so many other products available now in this category. More products coming. There's, Canadian ones included in that. That actually the way to drive change is with that collective voice and with that momentum. And I really think that we're at that stage where I would not have believed 20 years ago we'd be up here having this conversation. But the work that has been done, and you see what's happening in, particularly in Ontario, and I'm proud to say I live here. But for the rest of Canadian patients, obviously that's a challenge. So it is that kind of almost, I see this as a call to action, that we can work together, we can collaborate and actually drive change to enable equal access.
Excellent, thank you. So I'm going to ask you another question, Jane, sorry. I think you're the best person to answer it. So National Pharmacare received Royal Assent in October 2024, in Canada, of course. The Ford government, I read recently, is looking at trying to accelerate reimbursement for oncology medications, improving the time to reimbursement by 9 months. So some positive developments in Ontario and Canada with respect to trying to improve prescription drug coverage. So with these programs evolving, how can we ensure radiotheranostics are prioritized within these emerging drug access frameworks?
Yeah, so I've mentioned about collaboration and just that, the momentum. There's an awful lot more voices now than there were. And then the flip side is that you have agencies like what is now the Canadian Drug Agency that have rebranded itself a little bit. They really are taking into account, they're listening to the fact that there is disparity across Canada. And even if you get that positive recommendation, you've still got the provincial pull through, even though you've negotiated your price, device, that you've still got that sort of logistics of province by province reimbursement, effectively, or funding. And the flip side is on the diagnostic side and even the devices side, which is, again, with TheraSphere, we fell through the cracks. We were a therapeutic device that was used in an interventional procedure, and it didn't fit into any category. So we didn't meet what was then CADITH. We couldn't go through there. We couldn't even go through some of the health technology assessments locally. Provincially, rather. So it was very much a hospital by hospital process. And what the CDA is looking at, and they've actually done some pilots on diagnostics, for example. So they have a willingness now to look at this. And I hope that other provinces are looking at what's happening here, what's potentially happening in BC, to actually accelerate the pull through, because that's, at the end of the day, it's all about the patients and the patients being able to access it. But there is a willingness that perhaps wasn't there before. It's hard when you're a single company or one or two companies talking about one product. It's much easier if it's multiple companies talking about multiple products. The other thing I will say is that I've mentioned about the Made in Canada as well. In this current political climate, I firmly believe in pulling the lever that, there are so many Canadian companies developing innovative products in multiple fields, in nuclear medicine and the theranostics, sort of everywhere, including a lot of startups. There's several of them in Ottawa, for example. So I think just that we do have this local Canadian technology and innovation, and again, pulling that lever together with the willingness of many of the folks to actually prioritize this, because it is really, it's great for patients. It's relatively, it's really complex, but it's relatively easy compared to some of the other new technologies that are out there. So it's, now is the time, really. So it's my call to action is, let's work together and do it, because there is that willingness.
Hot, so to speak. And we're leading in supply chain manufacturing in nuclear medicine, medical isotope development. We're leading in research. It's a real shame if Canadian patients don't get access to these great products. So we should be focusing on that. Okay, we're going to switch gears now and talk about infrastructure and capacity. So these questions focus on clinical readiness, logistics, human resource needs, and stakeholder roles in scaling radiotheranostics across Canada. First question is directed to both Julie and Amit. So what does a ready institution look like when it comes to implementing radiotheranostics? And what are the essential infrastructure and process elements? You kind of covered this a little bit, Amit, already, but do you have anything else to add?
Well, I'll let Julie get to it, the technical details, but I think it starts with the people. I think you need to have a strong team in place. We're very fortunate. I know the organizations that are successful in this have very good oncologists collaborating with nuclear medicine. They have great nursing staff, technologists, medical physicists, radiation safety officers. So all these people are really critical to launching the program, even before you start considering, what room are you going to treat them in, how are you going to get those, how are you going to order it. So I think it really starts with the people, and maybe I'll let Julie, who's probably more expert, to fill in the details.
I don't know if I'm an expert, but I'll let you know what I wrote on my notes. If you're looking to start up your own program, you're not alone. There are resources out there. Even if you want to search the literature, there is a joint guide between the SNMMI and the IAEA and the EANM on how to set up a theranostics center. And there's a number of other papers there as well, one from our own Rebecca Wong and a few of her colleagues on how to establish a robust theranostics program. But I agree totally with Amit. At the core of it, you need the infrastructure and the multidisciplinary processes for safe, efficient, and sustainable delivery of these drugs. And what ready looks like today might not be the same as what ready looks like tomorrow as well. We all know it's a very rapidly evolving field. We're getting new agents, new indications. The patient demand is going to change, so we have to be prepared for that. At UHN, right now, we're, okay with our patient numbers, not great, but it's not efficient and it's not scalable. And all of our infrastructure right now, it was purchased and operationalized for various programs across the hospital. Some of them are at the Princess Margaret, some of them are at Toronto General. So it's very not efficient, and it's not great for the patient either because they're going back and forth. So we're looking at building a centralized center. I know we're very fortunate to be able to do this, but it was made an institutional priority, and our foundation is actively fundraising towards our $30 million goal in order to build this centralized center. But if you're looking at, what are the core elements of building out a theranostic program at your institution, first and foremost, you need your multidisciplinary team, and you need governance on how it's going to operationalize. So you need nuclear medicine, you need oncology, radiation safety, nursing, and nuclear medicine technologists. And that's kind of the bare minimum. If you're lucky and you're at a bigger center, you might also have some specialists that can consult on complex cases, or medical physicists that can consult on dosimetry. But you should really look at setting up your steering committee early on, who can help guide that implementation, define what the governance is going to look like, and then coordinate across all of these different departments that need to be involved. Of course, you need all of the infrastructure in place, so radiation safety needs to have all of their processes in place for waste disposal, decontamination, and if there's any emergencies that arise. You need treatment rooms and washrooms that follow radiation safety guidelines. You need a radiopharmacy or a hot lab for the preparation and storage of the radiopharmaceuticals. And of course, you need the imaging, so your SPECT CTs, your PET CTs for diagnostic and follow-up. You need to have all your operational processes in place, and these are not trivial. This is for patient referrals, patient selection, scheduling and coordination of the patients, and this is very complex, as well as very clear patient education, particularly around radiation safety. And as I mentioned, you need to build it so that it's both scalable and sustainable, and to do that, you need institutional strategic alignment as well as leadership support from the very top levels. So this executive level support will allow you to fundraise like we are if you need to do that, allocate your resources to the right places, and plan for the long term, not just plan for today.
Excellent. Very thorough overview. Thank you very much for that, Julia. So is there room for the private sector to help in what we're trying to achieve here with respect to improving maybe imaging capacity, infusion capacity, given that we're up against very short timelines? Does anybody have a comment on that at all, or opinion on the private sector?
I mean, I personally believe there is a place for the private sector, but I think it's going to be the responsibility of the different provinces to make their own judgment call on how they want to best implement.
Very good. There are some wonderful companies right now in ISIO in British Columbia and MyHealth and CAMH that are adding the capacity we need today. So I don't see why they wouldn't be part of the solution for the future. Okay, next question is for Céline. So Céline, where do we see the greatest bottlenecks, and how can we collaborate to address them quickly?
So now that we're having access in most of the provinces for Pluvicto, capacity to bring the patients to treatment is actually the next big challenge. And we are fortunate to see the implementation of the programs across multiple different centers, across multiple different provinces. And the challenge may be different in different centers, but overall, across the country, we see three major bottlenecks. The first two are around scanning, so lack of PET scans, and the second one is lack of technologists. Specifically, if you combine those two, it gives two major bottlenecks. The first one is that we have still long waiting lists for scanning. We conducted market research on average across Canada. a patient needs to wait 8 weeks for scanning and 8 weeks for the Pluvicto patients. This is just too long. I mean, ideally, it should not be more than 10 days. I mean, in some provinces, we're making progresses, but this is something that we have to think through and address. When it comes to lack of technologists, we are seeing in some centers already difficulties in finding treatment slots. So one patient equal number of treatment slots, I mean, on average 4 to 6. So we have to plan for those slots, and most of the centers are not yet open to external referrals, and the one that has is already somewhat at capacity from a number of treatment slots perspective. So PET, scanning, and technologists are two big problems. The third bottleneck that we see, and that varies across provinces, but if I take the province of Ontario, we're starting the rollout with 5 centers. At some point very soon, we will need to engage into a discussion on potentially opening more centers. I think it was debated and presented today earlier. We will have to expand capacity and to bring the therapy closer to home. So the other thing I would say is that we're living through that moment, and of course, as Novartis, we are committed to be very strong partners in the implementation of radioligand therapy into the country. We are rolling up the sleeves, I can tell you, every single day with my team to help the different centers. As I said, the challenges in the provinces are different province by province. Within a province, it's different center by center. But we are definitely working in close partnership with everybody in the ecosystem to make sure that we have capacity. RLT needs to become a routine. We have to get ready now, not just for Pluvicto, but we have to be ready for all the next generations RLT to come.
It is really like dealing with 10 different countries, isn't it, in Canada, with all the provinces that we have. Every province is different. That adds to the complexity that already exists within the therapy. So thank you for that review. Next question is for Jane. So how can Canadian institutions better align clinical readiness with reimbursement frameworks when launching theranostics?
I think the question really, I think, is always, or the statement is always to start with the end in mind. And I'm a big believer of designing all clinical studies to think about reimbursement, and all too often we don't. Even in the big pharmas, and back in my BMS days, we didn't always get it right then either. But it's very much focusing on, we need to get regulatory approval, so we focus on what the regulators require rather than the payers. And it is things like, even doing studies in clinics. We've heard extensively about the logistics and the complexity and the number of healthcare practitioners involved, the number of time that's involved, sort of all of the different steps. And a really, really important thing for reimbursement is to be able to recognize those steps. And it's not like, doing a time study, but actually looking at utilities. So what clinical utilities, what are you using? How long is it taking? Who's doing the procedures from scan through to administration? And really thinking about that when you're doing studies. So it's more than the outcomes. It's also about the cost and being able to long-term then demonstrate ultimately cost effectiveness or affordability. And we forget about that, especially early on. So it is really, really valuable. The other thing that's super valuable is actually patient input. Patient-reported outcomes, it's messy, I know, but really one of the great things about Canada is that we do consider the patient when we make decisions, and that happens at a national level with the Canadian Drugs Agency. The first people to provide input on a company submission is the patient organisations. So I can't emphasise enough about how important they are. A lot of them are very sophisticated in their abilities. They're used to working with studies. They're used to working with industry, and their input can be absolutely critical, even at a really early stage, even in a proof of concept study. And then the last thing I will say is always think about your comparator, always. Again, even looking at proof of concept data, but what are you comparing it to? And really thinking about what standard of care is today versus what it will become when something actually comes in the market, because that is what the payers will be looking at, not what was standard of care 5 years ago when you first started the study. So just a couple of pointers.
Take out our crystal ball, basically, is what you're telling me, to predict the future. So that's no problem. It's easy to do. Easy to do. We're always concerned about affordability as well at Isologic. We're always concerned about how much products are or how expensive they are to make, because we do know that we're in a socialized healthcare medical system, and there's you can only charge so much for the products we're making. So we acknowledge that. Last question. We have about 15 seconds left. So I don't know if you want to maybe speed talk through this one. So the last question is, what types of investment policy innovation are most urgently needed to expand infrastructure for radiotheranostics at scale across Canada?
Just say you have 50 seconds. Is this on?
Yeah. Top line thoughts.
Yeah. So basically, I think the problem is that there's an extremely high demand for these therapeutics and diagnostics, right? And the current system is just not built out to support this. So what do we need? The solution is that we need to rapidly expand access to these diagnostics, have therapeutic facilities. And I think there are many ways to get there. Do all these things have to be in the current existing hospitals? Now, you try building out a room in a hospital, it will take a few years, a year, maybe just to get the plan approved and then everything built. So all these things have to happen fast. So, some of the things that we have to think about is that, do these things have to happen in the current physical plants? Can we have satellite facilities that are either operated by the hospital or have private sector, public-private partnership participation to run these things? So, the bottom line is that these patients can't wait a year. By that time they progress, they get sicker, they pass away. You just can't wait that long. So we need to do something very urgently and find a solution, think a little bit out of the box to see how we can get these treatments to these patients as quickly as possible.
Yes, Hélène?
Sorry, I just wanted to maybe finish by reading a few sentences of an email that I received on Monday. And I thought it would be maybe a nice way of finishing the panel, because that's essentially the reason why we wake up and come to work in the morning. So this is an email we received this week at Novartis from the caregiver, the wife of a patient. So she says, "Dear Novartis, as you know, Pluvicto was finally made available to patients in Ontario. We all jumped for joy that day. After testing in Mississauga to determine the eligibility, my husband finally received his first dose here in Ottawa. He is apparently one of the first in Ottawa to do so. His follow-up scan has shown that so far the medication seems to be targeting the metastasis throughout. I want to thank all of you for your efforts in getting this medication to the Canadians who need it, and of course to my husband in particular. He's been able to play some golf. Even better, he's been able to play with our son. The time that we are spending together is a gift."
That's what we're here for, as a patient, right? So thank you for sharing that. We need to remember that we're here for the patient. We're here for Canadian patients as well. So thank you very much for the panel. You've provided some excellent insight. Hopefully the conversation continues, and we can use some of the best practices that were shared today to be used for future radioligand therapies reimbursement in the future. Thank you.